following Conscious Consumer Network recording of a live broadcast is available to purchase in high definition at ethymarket.com. Support free and independent media by becoming a CCN pledger. For €10 a month, you can have unlimited access to CCN high definition downloads at ethymarket.com. Ethymarket, the ethical marketplace for conscious consumers.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Natalie-Marie Hart of Crystal Kids TV, broadcasting on CCN. I would like to thank the Conscious Consumer Network for allowing me to bring great guests onto the network. Today, I have my dear guest by the name of Dr. Carmen Boulter. Dr. Carmen is my first live guest on the Conscious Consumer Network. She is the creative fire behind the Pyramid Code series. She is the director, producer, and writer of the series. The Pyramid Code is an incredible series raising questions that the mainstream historians would never look at. Carmen has had an unshakable passion for Egypt, traveling there many times. Through support, Carmen did extensive research in the archives of the Egyptian Museum, gaining official access to the rare books library of the Facility of Archaeology in the Cairo University. Carmen is the author of Angels and Archetypes, an evolutionary map of feminine consciousness. Over the past decade, Carmen has been a university professor developing her online curriculum. Her latest achievement is InteractiveView.com, an online learning and social action network. Now she is also on the Conscious Consumer Network with her own TV show called InteractiveView TV. Carmen is in the works of a new documentary series called The New Atlantis. She has an Indiegogo campaign for The New Atlantis. Just search for New Atlantis Dr. Carmen Boulter, and you should find the Indiegogo campaign. I'll tell you why people should support Carmen, because Carmen's documentary, The Pyramid Code, is an inspirational documentary. It was well made and educational, thinking outside the box, unlike the mainstream documentaries. When I first watched The Pyramid Code, I learned there is more to the story than besides what they taught us at school at the time we went to school. But The Pyramid Code is such an educational and wonderful documentary and a must-watch. So before you go buy a coffee, give Carmen a little donation on her campaign. If you saw The Pyramid Code and you fell in love with it, find it in your heart to give her a little thank you, because Carmen needs it. Carmen did all her work and effort, and she has been putting it for years. Today on the show, we are going to be doing something a little different. We're going to be doing a mini commentary on the Pyramid Code series. Hello, Carmen. It's a pleasure to have you on the Crystal Kids TV show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm so proud of you that you now have your own TV show. How nice.
Thank you, yes. I'm very happy to have my own TV show, too. We're going to be doing a mini commentary on the Pyramid Code series. So now, CCN is going to stream Carmen's trailer, The Pyramid Code.
Who were the ancient people of the world, and what did they know? How can we interpret the symbols the ancients left us, appearing majestically on the temple walls? Has our science been able to explain how their structures were built? Or is it still a puzzle that has yet to be decoded? The Bible would have us believe that we are merely 6,000 years old. Yet geological, archaeological, anthropological, linguistic, and climatological evidence around the world tells a very different story. Could it be that the civilization of ancient Egypt is much, much older than 5,000 years, as traditional Egyptology tells us?
Egyptians themselves, in at least one stone tablet and one papyrus, tell the story that ancient Egypt is much, much older than the Egyptologists think it is.
To me as a geologist, it's unquestionable that the chronology has to be redone.
I think that all ancient cultures were very interested in the cycles of time and astronomy and how human beings are embedded in these cycles.
So there's certain things in common that they all seem to know, and we don't know it. And I think our science right now is just beginning to relearn it. We find megalithic sites everywhere around the world.
Overwhelmingly, these places, the pyramids, the Stonehenges, were placed on ground where an unusual type of geology naturally concentrates the regular daily electromagnetic fluctuations that occur everywhere on the Earth each day.
Traditional Egyptology repeatedly tells a story that the pyramids were built around 2500 BC as tombs for pharaohs, yet no mummies have ever been found in any pyramid in Egypt. Could it be that the pyramids were not tombs? And if not, what function did they have?
All of those concepts about it being a tomb are nonsense.
In fact, I don't even think there's good evidence that it ever was a tomb for any pharaoh whatsoever.
Of all of the wild theories floating around the pyramids, the actual wildest is the one that's accepted without question by all Egyptologists, which is that the pyramids served as tombs. Of all of the theories for which there's zero evidence, that one has zero squared evidence.
We don't find mummies in the pyramids.
A lot of experiments have been done that show that there's a certain type of energy that does not exist in our current science. The ancients knew a lot more about it than we do, and they used it in their machines, their devices, their engineering.
And the megalith builders designed these structures and then built them in such a way as to further concentrate those energies. So they definitely seem to have known what they were doing.
Strange things happen sometimes in sacred sites, and those are clues that the physics that we're taught in school is not everything, that there's something else that can go on.
The core of the pyramids, at least at Giza, are made out of one type of limestone. That kind of limestone conducts electricity pretty well. And then they chose to sheath the pyramid in the whiter Tura limestone, which has almost zero magnesium content. They were built exactly like, if you will, an insulated wire. Why the granite in the passageways? Granite is slightly radioactive, and it will ionize or electrify the air.
The Great Pyramid was basically a device, a generator for, if you will, broadcasting and transmitting throughout the planetary structure a type of field which uplifted the entire humanity.
They were intended actually to somehow or another spiritualize a whole civilization. In other words, to provide a widespread, high level of energy that people needed because a descending age was upon them.
Many traditions around the world recognize this large cycle of time. They think of it as a great period of collective human spiritual gestation.
The myth of progress, also known as the Darwinian delusion, states that humanity has been steadily evolving, leading us to believe that today we are the most technologically advanced we've ever been. Yet evidence from megalithic sites demonstrate sophisticated knowledge of high-level technology, subtle earth energy, and astronomy marking extended cycles of time. Could it be that the ancients were actually more advanced than we are today?
And it's somewhat counterintuitive to what we've learned in our own Western education, that it's referred to as the myth of progress, that human beings today are in all ways superior to human beings that came before. It's simply not true. What we refer to as history that began some 6,000 years ago is really the advent of a different style of social organization that's typified by the dominator mode, hierarchies of dominance, warring deities, warring mythologies, and control systems.
It eventually declined, and then when that happened, the whole idea of the schools of mystery and the ancient knowledges and preserving those traditions that had come down from those fabulous ages, that was lost. And then eventually it was ridiculed, and then finally it had to go underground because people would either actively burn those texts or, persecute the people who had that belief system. And I think at that point we were in the Dark Ages.
Hakim Awian is an indigenous wisdom keeper who has spent his life at the foot of the Sphinx in the shadow of the pyramids. A trained archaeologist of 53 years, Hakim has made a bridge between ancient knowledge, passed down from generation to generation, and fieldwork around the pyramids.
What we have of ruins here, it's the latest walls built up on the ground level. So how about the lower level? You can see it with your naked eye.
In the museum, you have statues. You notice that the woman put the arm around the man's shoulder. And that shows, are they equal? No. Woman was the upper head in the family.
Granite is a transmission stone. Don't compare people of today like the people of the ancient days. The people of ancient days were healthy. They able to use the senses.
The power we get from the pyramid is to energize our glands and organs.
The Pyramid Code explores the gap between modern science and ancient science through interviews with recognized scientists exploring new theories about the sophisticated technology of the ancient Egyptians and its place in the distant past.
You come to tentative conclusions. If more data comes in that seems to indicate something else, I don't ever want to be afraid to change my conclusion.
It's not fair also. It's not fair to deny what you can see and touch by your own hands.
It's like great art or great spiritual insight, expansion of consciousness. In a way, there's nothing more important than that. And I think that was one of the primary functions of structures like the Great Pyramid.
It's good for healthy life, to keep life healthy.
Perhaps our science is ready to rediscover the secrets of the ancients. Perhaps we can now crack the Pyramid Code.
We saw the trailer, and we know what the Pyramid Code is about after finishing her wonderful trailer. Your trailer was well done, and the Pyramid Code documentary is respected by a lot of people, including me. Now, what inspired you to do the Pyramid Code series? You don't answer the questions in your documentary series. You actually open doors to new possibilities. You think outside of the box with your documentary, while the mainstream documentaries are always with the same regular story. Mainstream media gives us a misinterpretation. Could you please be so kind to give us a mini commentary on the trailer? I'm sure many people have many questions for you, so could you please do that for my audience? Thank you.
Well, the motivation behind the Pyramid Code was broad enough, but the thing that really pushed it was Hakim's age. He's becoming elderly. And Hakim Awian is the indigenous wisdom keeper in the Pyramid Code. And a few people had filmed him in mini documentaries, but no one had ever logged his entire body of work. And much of what he knew is, he's now on the other side, was passed down by verbally, right, from the generations. And so it wasn't anything that was ever written down. And so he has a unique way of knowing. And in our world, we want to align that with science and other people who would make the comments that would support what Hakim said. Hakim was a very, very interesting character for sure. And I sat with him every day I was in Egypt when I didn't have a group. And so I lived over in Egypt for 2.5 years, and I went over there 29 times, and I would go to his house whenever I wasn't busy leading my tours. And what was interesting about Hakim was that he would never tell me anything unless I already knew it. So if I just asked him a question, like, tell me about Nefertiti and Akhenaten in the Amarna period, no, he wouldn't say a word. But if I said, does this have to do with this and that's connected, and then he wouldn't stop talking for 3 days about it. But I noticed that when there were other people around, if they didn't have the ears to hear his depth of wisdom, he didn't have anything to say. He would talk in what I call word salad. And so the Pyramid Code is based on Hakim's work. He's selectively put into the scenes but mostly it was about me finding someone else who could support the science. And so I actually have 9 hours of footage of Hakim. And since the Pyramid Code came out, more science is coming out that supports what he's saying. But I think Hakim was really a linguist at heart. And so he was always looking at the turns of phrase. Now, Kempt is the ancient language, not Arabic. Arabic is modern Egyptian, what they speak. And so the ancient Egyptians had a completely different language that he somehow had access to. And the clues, most of the clues of how he knew what was wrong with the traditional story in Egypt came from the language itself. So most of the things, like even pyramid, is a Greek word meaning the horizon beyond. And but he talks about that, like per netter and per ba and per ka, which isn't in the Pyramid Code because it was hard to confirm. But it, it's like the house. A pyramid is a house of the soul, and temple is a house of the spirit, right? And so all of these different things are contained within the language. And so a priest and a priestess is someone who works with water. Mm-hmm. The water were made 70% of water. And they were able to blow the hydrogen and oxygen molecule apart. But that's the thing that goes on inside our being with the transmutation of the atom. And that's where abilities come from. Teleportation, levitation, bilocation, alchemy, manifestation, and telepathy. And so he understood this in a very, very deep way. And so that's really the motivation behind the Pyramid Code. And so he understood that the pyramid fields were far more powerful. And because he lived there, right in front, like his house is like one building away from the nose of the Sphinx. But he was raised in the village of Abu Sir, which is along the Band of Peace. And so it really was his playground. And he'd tell me stories about when he went to school, his school chums, they would race each other home, and they would climb up the back right leg, up the tail of the Sphinx, and get up onto the back, and then they'd lay down on their backs because nobody could see them. And the trick was who's going to get there first, right? And then they'd go and play and go into the underground tunnels. And 90 or so years ago, they weren't all blocked. So in the past century, much has changed on the plateau, and the big wall went up, and paving all over the top of the Temple of Isis and that sort of thing. So the Pyramid Code really was about captivating and recording the great teachings of Hakim.
Mm-hmm. Hakim is an incredible man, and the Pyramid Code series was really well done. Mm-hmm. People don't understand how much money it takes to make a documentary. This documentary series is unforgettable. Could you please tell us how much it cost and how difficult it is to make a documentary series?
Well, first of all, I didn't realize that I was a filmmaker, and so I didn't go down traditional channels to do it because I really, I hadn't gone to school for filmmaking. But I had been making video tutorials for my students when I was a professor at Chen Kuo Technology University in Taiwan. And so, but I did a lot of research. I kept going over to Egypt. You mentioned in the introduction, I spent a summer, and actually it was Hakim who arranged the permits to go to Cairo University. And so I had made some initial approaches to the Faculty of Archaeology. And so I had to have all kinds of paperwork to get in through the gates of Cairo University. And I understood that the Faculty of Archaeology had this rare books library. And what was in there is all the field notes of anyone who had ever done research on the Giza Plateau. And they were in 4 languages: German, French, English, and Arabic. And there's no filing system. So the women would go and pull books off the shelves and bring them and put them on a big table. And I sat there pretty much all summer reading these logs and taking notes. And so, those sorts of trips cost a lot of money to go back and forth and to stay there. But really, flying crews around to have, several videographers, and they always need an assistant as they're doing walk and talk, as you say. So they're following me by walking backwards with the camera, and they didn't want to trip over a camel or a rock or something. So they always needed someone there with them. But also to be capturing and logging the footage at the end of every day. And then to, free up the cards and all of that, and also paying for the equipment. Mm-hmm. It was several research trips, going several places. And then, of course, we had trouble a couple of times. When we went to Nabta Playa, we had We had to go back 3 times basically with different crew members because, the first crew didn't really know how to. They promised more than they could deliver in terms of their capabilities, and it's very difficult to assess. And so, there's a lot of things and one of the issues is anyone who participates in creating a film will have a reel, they say, REEL. And so they tag together everything they've worked on, but you don't know if they were filing papers and getting the coffee or if they were the creative fire behind it. So you can say you worked on it, but which parts did you do? And so a lot of people presented themselves as being expert editors, but they didn't know anything about the subject matter. So if the movie had been about motorcycles, they probably would have been fine. And so I call it ceilinged out. They would get to the peak of their ability and then they couldn't understand the constructs. And so to find editors who actually could carry the story because they understood it was really a trick. And so it turned out that, they were Googling practically all day to check the facts. Now, a lot of the facts that are in the Pyramid Code are more accepted. Yes. And so that was another difficulty because it was right on the cutting edge. And people didn't understand, they didn't know how to cope with it. So, and most people who approached, and this I find pretty much across the board when people start to work with me, they all need new computers because a lot of people are pushing on the end of their technology and it's outdated and it doesn't work as well. So we need the latest equipment, flights, accommodation. If we're going to do all the film shoot on the Nile, then you have to pay for a cruise and all the food and accommodation for the whole crew. So, it just adds up and adds up and adds up. But then an original score, you have to pay Michael Damon to make the original music. And that was fascinating in itself because he went out and bought ancient instruments. He went out and bought an oud, which is an ancient instrument from Egypt. And so he composed it based on the narrative that I gave him. And so I told him that it was like the crying goddess. The goddess is, has lost in patriarchal times. The goddess really has no place. And the sacred feminine has been denigrated. So he went out and found a soprano singer, a female vocalist. And it's true, it does sound like she's way off in the distance crying, I'm over here somewhere. And so that becomes an expense as well. And so it really adds up. New camera equipment, because right then when I was filming, we were on the cusp between standard definition and high definition. And the director and producer that originally had approached me from Hollywood, they said, oh, you don't have to worry about HD. It'll be a long time before people need that. I think, no, wait a minute. If we're going to make something that's enduring, that's worth making, it's not going to be long before everybody's in HD and then it isn't, right? And so, and the other part was the aerial footage. It took me 6 months and I had to negotiate with the Ministry of Defense to get into the Air Force base because the Air Force owns the sky. Okay. And so you can't fly anywhere in Egypt without their permission. And so it took me 5 months and several $1,000s to book this Gazelle helicopter. And the Minister of Defense himself had to sign the order. And so that was hair raising. And then we get to the helicopter and it was no bigger than like 3 chairs beside each other, no seat belts, no doors. So I was like, I'm not sure if I want to get in there, but after 6 months and 5 months and thousands of dollars, it's like, so that was extremely, extremely expensive to do that. And then I thought we were going to be able to have a gyro, which is something that you attach the camera to so that it doesn't wiggle. And they kept saying, yes, they have one. Because one time we actually rented the equipment and brought it to Egypt so that we had it there because you can't rent equipment there. And then there's the whole issue of permits to film because you're not even allowed, not allowed filming anything in Egypt. So even with the Department of Antiquities carte blanche permit, which again, you pay for, but what it does is it registers you and then they all come and they want money and they still tell you you're not allowed to film. So at one point, Hakeem was with me and we were at Saqqara and we had this permit and they threw the permit on the desk in the chief inspector's office, and it was all in Arabic with rubber, stamps and seals and pages thick. And he threw it down on the desk and he said, "How do I know it isn't fake, that you didn't fake it?" It's like, really? That's how they're talking to us? After spending months going back and forth to the Department of Antiquities office and going to this office and this office. And so I got a pretty good view of how many people work in these offices and how many, the red tape you have to go through to film anything in Egypt. And then we'd run out of time because I'd spend all my time working on the permits, and then we'd have to go back again, right? So, but that one time at Saqqara with the carte blanche permit, they hauled Hakim off to the police station. And they were there telling me, "Get out of the car, you're going to the police station too." And I'm like, "No, I'm not getting out of the car." And there they were, "Get out of the car." I'm like, "I am not voluntarily walking into the police station." But finally I went to get Hakim, and it was the first time I saw him intimidated and quiet and, kind of under their thumb. And so for all the things I did and all the, the footage I managed to take, with limited permits, you get in trouble when you have the permit, not when you don't have the permit. So everything's backwards, totally backwards. So those are the sorts of things that are, really wearing for sure. But then after we got well into the editing suite, and then we realized that we didn't have enough footage. Because if you're going to switch out footage every 3 to 4 seconds, which is what the Pyramid Code is, and my conviction was to not repeat shots, as you will see in some shows, they'll have a still photograph and do the same thing every time they say the word Chichen Itza, it's that same thing. And I don't think that's fair to the audience. I think the same thing works for like a PowerPoint presentation when somebody stands there for 5 or 10 minutes with one slide. People need that stimulation of something original to carry it, right? Right. And so it took endless hours to edit. Like I called it the Bible. And so I transcribed every word of all the interviews. And, with, some people like Graham Hancock, we used every word he said, but other people would speak for hours and we could only use 4 or 5 minutes of their work because a lot of it was, And so then you have to put a picture over the top. Like how many of those interviews that I sat there and took every and out, but then the picture jerks. So then you need a picture over the top. It took me weeks and months to transcribe every word of the transcripts for sure. So that's incredibly time consuming. Like Hakim's single spaced is something like 70 pages, 9 hours of Hakim.
Nice.
Yeah. And so, and the videographers stayed an extra day and they didn't understand him at all. And I said, you're a fly on the wall. I'm interviewing him because he won't, if you're there, I don't get it. He shuts down. And so I said, you have to give me a chance to make bridges for you, to illustrate with footage, and real things, real high technology, and a picture of something that's real, you can see it with your own eyes, touch it with your hand. And then to make animations for the things that were more conceptual, right? Like, the pyramid as a power plant. Mm-hmm. And to find scientists, as I said, to corroborate it and to carry everything with the music stems, and then to switch it when there's a different mood. So all of those things were making bridges so that people would understand it. And so for a long time, there's 174 animations in those 5 episodes. You don't realize that. You're not counting them as you're seeing them. But when they were making the animations, we were racing against the clock at the end because it was just, the editors ended up calling the project The Beast because it was just so huge. And, one editor, one of them, Jeffrey Sternberg, he had never edited anything longer than 15 minutes when he got on this project. And then there he was with 5 hours to edit. But, so he ran out of music. He needed more music, so I had to get more music made. And it seemed like every piece that Michael Damon made was better than the one before. He's amazing. He's amazing, amazing. So I'm hoping that the Indiegogo campaign will give me enough so that I can use him again, because to me, he was key to that pacing and the success, but it's also how it was edited. So all of those pieces have to be put together so that it's not hard to understand. Like even a child can understand it because it's handing it to you. But what I was going to say is when the animations weren't finished, there was a flag on the spot where the animation would go. and it would go black, and it would say animation 121, shimmering pyramid, and and so you're cruising along watching it before it's finished, and you get black. It's like, I'm telling you, it was so painful for me to watch it because I just wanted to see the animation. And it was right at the end before they were all there. And so if you don't have the picture and you hear the music and you hear the voice and you're waiting for the animation, it's disheartening. It's awful. It's awful. It's like you're hanging on the edge of your seat. Even me, having created it, watching it over and over again, you want to see how it all fits together, right? And so the animation of the timeline that goes across, where you see, the golden age and the linear one, that cost $9,000.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. And the 3D reenactment of the pyramids with the river, the Nile beside it with the red, white, and black, also $9,000 just for one animation. And then the cubes that fly in the branding of the pyramid code, where everything's in the pyramid code, that plus the lower thirds, which is the line that comes out and the sparkles that say who the person is, and color correction, which I'm not sure was money well spent, but that cost $63,000 just for that.
A lot of
because it's so labor intensive. So then after, it was finished, and the whole thing had to be delivered to a studio that was going to do the color correction and then create the broadcast tapes, right? Because every different network in different countries needs a different broadcast tape style. They have different styles and specifications. And so, that had to happen, and I had to pay for all of that. So, between the equipment and the people, I probably had 7 editors work on it, and only 2 of them were really successful. So, one of them, I made a studio in my house. So I actually had to renovate my house in order to, and that wasn't part of the cost, but, that's what it cost me to have a suite so that the editors could come and stay, because they lived in New York. Mm-hmm. And we needed to have a certain amount of face-to-face consultation. But then after that, they completed by working largely like we do on Interactive View with Google Drive. And, I'd watch it and put the time code on. So at 23.02 minutes and seconds, switch out this picture, and then say to what? So then I'd have to go find the picture and send it to them, and then they would switch it out. So sometimes I wondered if it would, would have been more efficient for me to just be doing it. But I never in a million years thought I was a film editor, right? So you have to rely on certain expertise. But the other 5 editors, they, one of them, all she did was rename clips, which turns out in the new technology isn't the right thing to do. You're better putting tags on them instead of renaming them, because then Final Cut can't find them because you renamed them. And somebody sat there, and I'm getting there. And have you got this done yet? No, I'm getting there. And then really there was no output.
Right.
And how long do you wait for a person, they didn't really know what they were doing. And so even if, I suppose in any industry, it's really hard to tell if somebody's as good as they claim and if they actually can get the job done.
That's so true.
And so I think that's going to be the case, no matter where you go. Some people under promise and over produce, but most people it's the other way around, where they aggrandize and they claim to be better than they are. Mm-hmm. Yes. And then it doesn't work. So, dealing with an awful lot of people, as you can see in the credits. I mean, it's people, that end up involved and make their contribution. So, it's a huge puzzle piece. It's a puzzle that, all the pieces have to be in place. Mm-hmm. But to me, the thing is the pacing. Yes. And we actually had 6 episodes, and we watched them all together, the 2 editors and me. And I wanted each episode to be distinct, that it would start different, it would have a different feel to it, it would cover different material, and a story would hang together with it. So the Band of Peace was all about the pyramid fields themselves. High-level technology is the evidence of what the ancients were capable of. Sacred cosmology was all about, Nabta Playa and how the stars worked and their whole thing about cosmology, right? And so what happened when you left, when you left the physical incarnation. And then the empowered human, which is what we're working on now, is a model for an empowered humanity. And I think that we get our clues from the past. We get our clues from ancient cultures if we can possibly uncover them. But so much as, books have been burned, and, they've been forcing us to think a certain way, and all that other wisdom of how to live well and how to make the planet work for everybody, not just for a few people, is tucked away, which is why what the value is of doing something like this. And then the last episode is a new chronology, which is like, how can we begin to think? You talk about thinking outside the box. How can we think outside of 6,000 years, which is what everything in our culture wants us to think about. And I've said it before on interviews with you, the agenda of the patriarchy is to erase evidence of everything other than itself. So the patriarchy is like, we know what's going on, we're the smartest we've ever been, and there's nothing older than now, which is why we can't possibly piece things together all the way back before Atlantis even. And so that's what the value of that timeline actually is to, further back, and to understand the cycles of time. So to me, that's a big contribution. And a lot of people asked me to send them that timeline. They wanted to look at it again. But even the research going into that itself and how it fit with the astrological ages and everything. There's an awful lot that goes in. There's an awful lot that goes into it. Now, the other thing you mentioned was we're not telling you what to think. Okay, in TV, the news, this is what happened on this day, and this person is responsible for it. And okay, case closed. As long as you can assign, and that's what the law is doing. You close the case when you find someone that you can blame, whether they did it or not. Like, how many people are on death row that really didn't commit that crime, but somebody got away with it, because somebody else is paying the price. And so, and I think that that's a precision that may or may not be true, right? So in school, Columbus discovered America in 1492. It's like, were you there? How do you know? And then of course we find out through Gavin Menzies' work that, the Chinese were there a long time before Columbus came. And when Columbus arrived, the Indians were living in wooden houses and had markets for art and markets for food, and they were tremendously civilized. And then you have to call them savages, so we've got the story completely wrong. But that the precision in school, this is who did what, this is who invented this, and you don't know they stole the invention or whatever. So in the Pyramid Code, instead of telling you what to think and giving you new facts, it's not the point. It's inviting you to think. So every episode starts with 2 questions. Who were the ancient people of the world, and what did they know? And then, even at the end, how would our culture change? The last few words in the whole series, when we're wrapping it up, how would our culture change if consciousness was the highest value instead of profit? Well, that invites you to engage. And it's not like, I just get exhausted watching some of these things. I've been watching a lot of what's been done on Atlantis. And it's all contradictory. It's all the patriarchy sticking their little agendas in between. It's like listening for what I call script writer's fantasy in a movie or in a TV show, where they line up a few facts and then they deviate and everybody's fighting, but they're still telling you what to think. And school does that. The news does that. And in a PhD, they teach you to hedge. Like, from the evidence we have, from the data we've collected, the data seems to indicate that it could be that there's a relationship between that. The more of this, that an effect will happen, because in 20 years someone could come along and make a big revelation, and then you're there saying, I know, and it's a precision that we really can't afford. And so as long as the one right answer hypothesis of school, the ABCD, well, it's all debatable, and that's what we want to do. Like, is Atlantis here or here or here or here or here? All of the above. It was a worldwide seafaring culture. But most of these things it was here, no, it was here, no, it was here, no, it was here. Why couldn't it have been all those places if there's some evidence? And why tell you where Atlantis is? Why not let you speculate and think, well, gee, that seems to make sense. And that's the experience of listening to watching the Pyramid Code, is that it invites you to question. But the other thing, because everything in it is tied to something real, okay? Like this is the drill hole, and look how straight it is, and it's made out of salt. How did they do it? You know, and so how'd they do it? You find yourself, you know, asking questions. But, you know, that I guess it was one of Hakim's kids that said, a really good question is better than a mediocre answer.
That's so true.
It really, really is. And so what's the matter with wondering and living in wonderment, but also feeling your body? Like, how do you feel when you listen to that? So when I listen to a lot of this stuff that's fake, I'm like, you know, you get whiplash, like, what, because the things don't fit together. But that doesn't matter to the news. You know, like I remember when the revolution happened in Egypt, and somebody called me up and said, turn CNN on. We're on CCN, but that's CNN. Turn CNN on. And I watched it for, you know, 5 minutes, and there were 3 stories, and each of them contradicted each other. So then I turned the volume off because I kept getting phone calls, but I'm watching it. And there were people walking around with their kids on their shoulder. And it was right across from the radio and television building where I had to go for all my permits, right? So I thought, oh, that's the Nile, and right behind is this thing. And oh, yeah, I know that park bench. And yeah, I know exactly where they are. Looking across the river at the, you know, the floating restaurants and stuff. I knew exactly where it was. And actually, it looked like a picnic. You know, people walking around, you know, having a groovy afternoon. And then you turn the volume back on. Oh, yeah, danger, and they're all fighting. And so the words are telling you what to think about the picture. And the words are actually more powerful than the picture, because the picture to me looked like a mellow afternoon at a festival. I mean, why would you bring your kid, your infant, if it was really, you know, a war zone? Mm-hmm. And then there was this one kid, and he had a police shield, and he was by himself, and he was throwing it down on the ground. There was no one there. The clip was like 5 seconds long or something. And they kept repeating it. So you saw the kid throw it down. You saw the kid, violence. What violence? I don't see anything. I see a kid by himself. I mean, he's not hurting anybody by throwing the shield down on the ground. Yes. You know what I mean? So this is how they do it. And and people do not like that. They don't like how they feel when they watch this stuff. And I think that the new generation, millennials, are like, I'm not watching that. Mm-hmm. And there's less and less to watch on TV because there's more and more of them telling you what to think and goofing everything up and giving concepts that aren't true and slipping in non-truths here and there. Right. And it's exhausting. So yes. The people's experience of watching the Pyramid Code is positive. Yep. Because it's engaging, because it asks questions. It shows you stuff and lets you decide for yourself. Yep. And so the most common comment that I've gotten about it is that when people finish watching it, they watch it again. Mm-hmm. I had one guy tell me that he'd watched it 100 times.
I love a Pyramid Code series.
Yeah. I mean, I can sit down and watch it and, you know, and think it's really cool too, because I'm removed from it now. I mean, I know I made it. I wrote every word of the narration. Mm-hmm. You know, I directed the cinematography of it and supervised the writing of the script and, you know, everything in between. Organized, was the interviewer when people were interviewed. You know, like I said, sat with Hakim for 10 years. But still, it's like reading something that you wrote 10 years ago. Like, it seems like, oh, you read it like you're reading it for the first time and watching it for the first time. So yeah, it's been a pretty cool experience because I really didn't know I was a filmmaker when I started it. I thought when I started it that I was recording Hakim. Mm-hmm. Right.
You went for a long journey by doing a Pyramid Code.
Mm. It was an awfully long journey. I mean, 29 trips to Egypt, but all of the involvement with the Department of Antiquities and the permits and all that stuff. Like when people say, oh yeah, I'm going to make a film about Egypt, I'm like, good luck. Because you bring a tripod to a site and the guards are all there. I mean, I'm sure they don't speak English, but they not allowed, no madame, no camera, no madame, not allowed. That's their broken record, even with the permit. Mm-hmm. And I don't think they've seen many permits because when they see the permit, they're like, what's this? Mm-hmm. And then they keep their broken record going. No, madame, not allowed. No, madame, not allowed.
Yeah. Yeah. Could you please tell us about your new documentary series, The New Atlantis?
The New Atlantis. Well, essentially, for continuity's sake, The New Atlantis is 2 episodes before the Pyramid Code and 2 episodes after. if you can appreciate that. I'm not sure yet if it's going to end up being 4 or 5 episodes. The plan has been 4, but I also like parallel structure. So if one is 5, then the other one may as well be 5. Mm-hmm. But I was approached when I went to speak. I was giving a paper at a scientist conference in St. Petersburg, Russia. And a man named Valery Uvarov approached me, and he had written a book called The Pyramids, and in Russian that was translated. And he had seen the Pyramid Code because it was airing on national TV with a Russian soundtrack. And he asked me, he said, I need to talk to you. And he took me to his studio and showed me the stuff that he had been doing with experiments with pyramid technology. What you've heard, behind the Iron Curtain and all of that of, sharpening razor blades and charging batteries and charging medicine to make it more effective. And so he had a lot of equipment that had, spirals that almost look like the arms of the universe, solar system, galaxy. Funny that I should forget that. Okay, the arms of the galaxy. And he had taken crushed quartz and had white and black. So there was one white crushed quartz row and one black crushed quartz, and it went around. And I saw the molds for this. And so he used a polymer, a geopolymer, like Joseph Davidovich talks about, like it's almost like a cement that you pour it and then it hardens. And then he showed me all these pictures of these 14-foot crystals that came from Brazil that they actually were grinding up the pieces of them for it. And he explained all the technology of how he'd used it. And then he gave me the book. And he asked me if I would do 4 episodes for him of a new documentary. And it was about pyramid power. And then he had a contract, a $5 million contract to put up a new pyramid, a functioning pyramid in the exact center of the landmass of Russia, in Tomsk. And you can see it from Google Earth. It's there. They built it. And so I wrote out the science of what was in his book. And that's kind of the guts of the science of the New Atlantis. But what about the legends of Atlantis from before? And if we dig around, what can we find out from ancient texts that make slight references to Atlantis? Now, people will ask me, okay, well, what's the book? Give me the book that's going to tell me all the answers. Or, if you like ancient texts, pick one and tell me. But the thing is, everything is so muddied. And the people writing these books in the 1800s, 1900s, were coming from that patriarchal perspective. They didn't understand the ancients. Like I said, the agenda of the patriarchy is to erase everything, that made sense from before, to make everything in our world not make sense. And so there's no one book that's going to give you the information. So again, it's a really long journey. It's been a long journey for Valery Uvarov. It's, been a long journey for me. But it's almost like we pick up crumbs. Like we think we're going to go to university and get the whole loaf. But we're lucky if we get a crumb a week of a new thought. Like it's pretty hard to have a new thought. Yeah.
It is really
and when I did 12 years post-secondary after high school. And most of the time when I had a new thought, it was over coffee with one of the students that was in one of my classes. The teacher wasn't giving me the new thought. They were just repeating the old stuff. Right. And so, so the New Atlantis is about tracing the culture and also understanding, as the Pyramid Code gave us the gift of the Golden Age down, silver, bronze, iron, and working our way back up to the gold, just round and round. So in a golden age, the energy is more refined. Okay. So a faster vibration is more multidimensional. Right. And so a denser vibration moves slower and is dense. Like, angels, if you can't see it, it's not there. But a more refined energy can contain what's denser. But a dense energy can't contain the more refined energy, right? And so understanding that Atlantis was there long enough to go through more than one cycle. So if you look at all the things that have been tied to Atlantis in Hollywood and fantasies and all this stuff, they just use it as the dumping ground for any fictional story that people want, and they can make them all warring and make them all whatever, right? But the thing is it's much more than that. And of course they had time to densify and lose their way and find their way again, right? In like, if you can imagine 50,000 years or more. I mean, some will say 1,000,000 years ago is when Atlantis was there. Well, okay, how are you going to verify that? You know, so, well, they're Pleiadian and they're channeling. But I'm not going to just repeat what someone else said without having something to tie it to. But there are legends in ancient texts that come from different places and say the same thing, right? So that's more verifiable. And you'd say, okay, there's stories. Okay, there's stories. But is there anything that you can see? Because once you understand something of the past and then go into the field and verify it, then you've got a little bit of traction. You know, we're never going to know exactly how it was. But in reading lots of things on Atlantis, there's this one book, and it's a story between these. And when they said the names, I'm like, I kind of, that wouldn't have been their names. I mean, you know, like they wouldn't have talked like us. It wouldn't have been Natalie-Marie and Carmen in Atlantis, right? We would have had different names.
Right, that's true.
But they went to a cafeteria. They're having their conversation. I thought, cafeteria, that's us. That's our word. That's not their word. They wouldn't have gone to a cafeteria. And even picking up a fork and knife, we don't know how they ate. When were forks and knives invented? But that's an example of the person who's writing this fictional book on Atlantis, pulling in and looking through the lenses of how we dress. You know, she pulled on her pants. Well, did they wear pants? They probably wore flowing robes. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, and so all of these things are somebody trying to write a story without linking it or making it vague enough. The things we don't know, we leave vague. Mm-hmm. Right? We don't walk over the top and try to say we know. That's the challenge here. So most of what you see about Atlantis is a fantasy, and I'm trying to make it as grounded as possible. So I've done a number of shoots. I've got all new footage from Egypt. Took a crew of 13 days, and me, to film all new stuff, because I'm not going to show you footage that you saw in the Pyramid Code. I promise. That's my conviction, not to, because I don't think that's respectful of the audience. No. And that's why if you listen to the 100-some interviews I've done, I really work not to repeat myself. And so, I hear a lot of people talking, and it's like, didn't you just say that yesterday in another interview, where they'll say a whole paragraph and it's exactly the same because it's more like a script instead of it being, live. I will give examples that are similar, or a metaphor or something like that. Right. But that respecting the audience means that you expect them to remember what you said before and the picture you showed before. Right? Exactly. And so I know the Pyramid Code really well, because in a nanosecond, if you see a little clip or hear a little something, you know what is the Pyramid Code and what isn't the Pyramid Code. Yes, I do. You do. I know you do. Because you know it. Because you so that's why if there was a clip that was in the other series, you'd say, oh no, she already used that. So I had to go get all new footage. So it'll be new birds and and new flights with along the Nile, and new sunsets. Yeah. And so we're going to go on a film shoot in September. Right. To Bimini, and to some sites in Mexico, and down to where the Coral Castle is in Florida, and a little Atlantean village. Now, I know that there's stuff deep, deep underwater, under Cuba, beside Cuba, but it's so deep that they can't even send scuba divers down there. They have to send submersible submarines in not even a boat, like something that's even deeper than that, so they can send a camera down. But we'd never be able to get that footage. But still, in Bimini, there's lots of places where there's where a temple used to be, or a vortex. The Bermuda Triangle is 30 kilometers off the coast, 30 kilometers of miles, don't know. And so we plan to go and film underwater, and film the Bimini Road, and hopefully with dolphins. Yes. And then go to Cancun off the coast where there's whales. So the whales and dolphins really figured in to the Atlantean culture somehow. And then in the Minoan culture, which I don't think was King Minos at Crete, you see the dolphins right on the wall. And I guess the dolphins are coming back into the Mediterranean. For many, many, many years, the dolphins couldn't survive in the water because it was so polluted. But now they're coming up the Red Sea. And I guess beside the Suez Canal, there's a channel, and the dolphins are coming in from the Red Sea where they're prolifically there. You know, there's a place called Dolphin House off near Hurghada, Mar Salam in Egypt. And the dolphins are actually able to stay underwater for a long period of time. And they're going under the land. And there's a water passage that's letting them go back into the Mediterranean. So tracing all those pieces and, you know, and telling the stories and feeling the energy is part of it. Now, I've got this device called the GDV EPI, which is electrophotonic imaging, and it's souped up Kirlian photography. Not souped up, it's progressed Kirlian photography, where they could actually, the person would put their hand on a plate, an electronic plate, and it would then they'd be able to take a photograph of the aura. And so just the way our cameras are so much more sophisticated, our phones are so much more sophisticated than they were 10, 20 years ago, this equipment is able to measure a person's auric field and their chakra system and take a measurement, and then you expose a person to a sacred site and you can see the effect the site has on the person's energy field and chakra system, the alignment of the chakras. And so there's also this antenna called Sputnik, and of course all this was invented in Russia, that can measure the frequency, energetic frequency of a place, right? So you can go to a different place and you can compare different times the same place or different places and see what the energetic value is. And so I've done a lot of stuff with it in South Africa, in France, in Egypt, a lot of different places, and measured myself over a long extended period of time to see how sensitive this equipment is. Very, very, very sensitive. And so it's nice to know that there's something we can measure that before was invisible and impossible. You know, so I conducted an experiment on can being in the Great Pyramid contribute to somebody becoming more psychic? And what would the variables be if they were more psychic? What would that look like? And so we'll be able to take this equipment to the right on the boat above the vortices of the Bermuda Triangle. And you know that, you know, you've seen people with compasses and the compass doesn't work anymore when you're above the Bermuda Triangle. Well, why not? And how did that relate to Atlantis? So there's quite a few clues that are coming forward. And there aren't too many people to interview. I'm preferring the idea of being in the field and talking to people and having the commentary be standing on the site. And so I'm going to be doing another trip to Gunang Padang and Bora Bodour in December and measuring where there's a new pyramid there that's been found. So all of these places are linking up. I've got footage from the Bosnian pyramid. So I've been in production now for a while on it. But what I'm looking for is the funding to finish it for the editing, the music, the post-production, and a few more shoots. So if I don't get enough money, then I don't know if I can go to Russia and film that pyramid, or just tell the story through animation and graphics. And then the animations. I mean, animations are extremely expensive because they're impressive because they're time consuming. You know, simple ones are simple, and complicated 3D motion graphics it's just incredibly time consuming. So someone has to pay for that. Yeah. Me or the people who help. So I'm determined to finish it one way or another.
You are.
I suppose it's just the ease with which that happens and the number of shoots actually that will be included in it. But I'll finish it one way or another, even if I have to edit it myself.
Exactly. And I'm glad your determination to finish the project. I cannot wait to see the new Atlantis 4 episodes.
Yeah, it's going to be cool.
So
for sure, it's going to be cool.
So please
and stuff you've never thought of before. Go ahead.
So please go to her Indiegogo campaign to give her a small little donation. Anything helps. Anything. She needs anything.
Yeah, even $5.
Even $5. Yeah. So let's talk about the Egyptian labyrinth. CCN is going to stream a 3D mapping of the Egyptian labyrinth. So we just saw the 3D mapping of the Egyptian land birth. Klaus, who I've interviewed, has a lot to do with the scans and getting them done. Are there any new scans the last time I've interviewed you?
No, the project's actually a bit on hold at the moment because the next step would be to get permits from the Department of Antiquities. And because of copyright issues with the scan, as you know, I ended up going public because my team members were actually saying it was theirs, and that's not so. So the final report hasn't been issued, and again, funding will be required for that. But there's no dig if there's no permits.
Right.
And so there's a lot around the Department of Antiquities not giving not giving permits to any new archaeological team. Apparently, Hawara is an exception, but people's egos get in the way, and that can be quite debilitating. And so this isn't about somebody's ego. This is about all of humanity having access to see and learn about what's down there. I think we can pretty much say that with the success of other scans, that they found what they think they're looking for, they find in other countries. Okay. And so we're getting an increasing number of places that are verifying the accuracy of the scanning technology. So I don't see why, and very deep depths and looking through layers as well. So I think we can proceed with confidence that there's likely something that no one's ever seen before down there.
For sure. So could you please tell us where people can buy your Pyramid Code series?
If you go to my website, there's a video on demand on Vimeo, and you can either, get it for 24 hours for 99 cents an episode, or you can get a lifetime streaming, but you can't download it. So I'm reserving the rights, so that trying to keep it private that way.
Well, thank you very much for coming onto my radio show, Carmen. It was a pleasure having you onto the show. I hope to have you back on Crystal Kids TV very soon.
Thanks, Natalie.
Thank you for listening to Crystal Kids Radio Show on the Conscious Consumer Network. I would like to thank the Conscious Consumer Network for giving me a chance on their network. Please stay tuned for more shows. My website is www.crystalkidstv.radio.com. And also support me on my social media, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. I will really appreciate it.
If you really had to make a difference on a large scale with minimal resources, how would you go about it? Have you ever dared to dream of doing that which seems impossible? On a planet steeped with corruption and destruction, the question beckons, how do we change it? Media has a far-reaching impact on people and has been used to manipulate humanity into our current destructive patterns. In order to affect people into moving into constructive patterns of behavior, we need to construct a new paradigm of media. Conscious Consumer Network has been created with the explicit intention of giving the amazing truth-seeking, solutions-orientated, alternative media a place to fully realize their true potential with a cutting-edge, high-tech professional media platform. In turn, some of the greatest freedom-seeking hearts and souls of our time have realized the true potential of what has been created and have come together to provide their insight and inspiration on CCN. Conscious Consumer Network has become a unique, interactive information and educational network which provides a free-to-view, live-stream, ultra-high-definition channel to the world and features 25 live shows a week and growing with the addition of multiple language broadcasts. CCN has features comparable with mainstream media, such as being able to pause and rewind broadcasts whilst being live streamed. Catch up on this or previous broadcasts, now available from CCN High Definition Downloads. You can now purchase a high definition download of your favorite CCN show from ethymarket.com. Support free and independent media by becoming a monthly pledger. This can be done with a monthly pledge of €10, which will allow you unlimited access to CCN's high-definition downloads, which hosts a back catalogue of over 250 shows, which have been aired since the launch of CCN on the 1st of January 2015. In order to keep CCN on the air, public funding is needed. Please donate to CCN's Network Support Fund or become a monthly pledger. Help keep alternative media in the hands of the people. We thank you for supporting free and independent media.